Why do outbound marketing campaigns fail? It's usually because people give up too fast. When you decide to do outbound, when you decide to do demand generation instead of demand capture, you're choosing to try to meet people earlier in the buyer's journey than the point where they've decided that they have any form of interest. So if you do that, if you choose to interrupt people, which can absolutely work, you better think about this story. When I moved to the US, my son was young, he was 7. So in the first years when we lived here, we lived in the Seattle area. There's a lot of trees. And we came from the Netherlands. Not so many trees in our, directly around the house. But we had trees in our house. We had trees hanging over the garage, actually. And one night, 8 p.m. or so, someone knocks on the door, and my wife and I were not home. Our son opens the door. I think he was probably 8, 9 years old. He has no decision-making power over buying tree cutting services. It was one of the landscaping companies. So the door was closed pretty quickly. But the person who actually was knocking on the door handed him a flyer that ended up on our kitchen door. A couple months later, my wife walks outside, sees a branch hanging over the garage that looks a little iffy. And she remembers that flyer is in the drawer. She calls that company's still helping us 20 years later. But it took a couple of months before my wife made that phone call. And in a lot of outbound marketing efforts, when the initial email campaigns don't create the right conversion, the right responses, when it takes longer, the sales cycle, we don't think by ourselves, well, that's kind of expected because these people were earlier in their journey. They were not ready for a sales conversation. And we have to be ready, if we do outbound, to leave a flyer behind, to leave something behind that puts the control into the hands of our audience, who maybe at that moment in time are not interested, but may have a latent interest that comes up later, where you need to make it extremely easy for them to find you. Just one of the tips that I think really works for outbound marketing.